A horrible, horrible place. This is something that happened to me when I was around 9 years old. That's about 8 years ago. What's strange is that it still scares me more now than I remember it did at the time. I live in an area that is literally half in England and half in Wales, and I went to a school in Wales. This experience took place at a sort of education activity center, where we spent a few days doing things like hiking, trudging through streams, raft building, and so on. My memories of this place are a bit foggy, and that may be because I hated it so much that I tried to erase it from my mind. You see, I hate all these sporty activities a lot, plus the fact that the complex was filthy and it was a really run down and unpleasant place to be. Now, this is the interesting part. There was something else there. On top of all the obvious dirt and its miserable setting, there was something about this place that I couldn't see, but I could feel. Everywhere I went, I just got this feeling of dread. It just felt so wrong in a way I find very hard to explain. I think at the time, maybe I was too busy trying to survive, walking in rainstorms and climbing mountains, to worry about this feeling. But it wasn't until my last day there when something actually happened. I also feel I should mention that the reason I'm posting this now is because I happened to find some photos on the internet of the building, and it sent all the memories flooding back. On the last morning of the trip, I was in pretty good spirits because I knew we were finally getting out of there. We were preparing to get into a van that was taking us to some activity that required us all to be wearing this special kind of clothing. I remember nothing about what this activity was. For some reason, I had to go back into the part of the building where these outfits were kept. I was on my own, while everyone else was waiting outside for the van. Here's what I remember about the room. It was small and compact, dimly lit, and consisted of wooden benches against each wall, with red suits hanging up. There was a machine in one corner that made a loud humming noise, and a window that looked out onto a dense wooded area. There were 2 doors, one went straight outside, but it was always kept locked for some reason, and another went into the main part of the building, where the dorms were. So anyways, I was in there alone. I suddenly felt extremely hot, and I remember having to sit on one of the benches for a minute because this strange feeling came over me. Then, I looked up at the window. I'm shivering as I write this, because now I've remembered I cannot get this face out of my head. I saw a man with long hair and a hideous face. The reason this is on a ghost story site is because this man did not look human, he looked dead. Then instantly, the face was gone. Like 1 second it was there, then it just disappeared in a flash. I ran like hell down the corridors and out the building, feeling dizzy for the rest of the day. One final detail I like to add is that on the bus home, I've told one of my teachers and described the person. I don't remember her response, but a boy sitting behind me, who was not one to make up stories, whispered to me, "I've seen it too." So there you go. I'm sorry I can't remember every single detail, but this was quite a long time ago. I just wish I hadn't seen those photographs and been reminded of this awful place. A drug house. Whenever I think about this experience, I wonder how many entities were actually watching us. What do you think? About 15 years ago, on a hot summer afternoon, my oldest son Duncan and his wife Janice stopped by for coffee. As several family members were sitting around the kitchen table, just chatting casually, he told us about a house he and Janice were thinking of buying. I was worried when Duncan told us where it was located, in an especially dangerous neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. Everyone knew about the area's high rate of violence, problems with drug dealing, and other related crime. Duncan and Janice were only in their 20s at that time, but they already had 4 kids. They were barely getting by on Duncan's meager paycheck, so you can't understand why. When they heard about a quick path to owning their own home, they were really tempted. Duncan said the friend of a friend was making decent money on a house flipper, someone who bought derelict houses for next to nothing and then resold them for a profit after doing superficial repairs. The house flipper claimed not to know anything about the history of the house, except that the last tenants were drug dealers and there had been a police raid. Although the house had been trashed inside and was now condemned, the owner said if Duncan can do a certain amount of work on it so it would no longer be red tagged, he could buy it for an incredibly low price on a land contract. Duncan said he'd gone to look at it, but felt there was something wrong about the house. Would some of us go check it out with him? Although paranormal things scare the socks off me, I was very worried about Duncan and his family, so I agreed to go. And since he'd piqued everyone's interest in visiting a possibly haunted house, a whole contingent of people offered to go along with us for protection. So Duncan, Janice, my now deceased mother, my second oldest son college-aged, and one of my second son's friends, my husband and I piled into 2 vehicles and off we went. It was a dingy white 2-story place with a dented aluminum siding and some boarded up windows. Built as a sturdy middle-class single-family home in the 1930s, it was showing serious signs of neglect now. The neighborhood had changed over the years, but not for the better. We parked in the street. Neighbors watched intently from their porches as we trooped around to the back door. The yard was a mess, overgrown with weeds and littered with junk. We didn't need a key to get in because the door was always kept unlocked. Surprising, because once we'd entered the house, we found the previous owners had left behind kitchen appliances, 2 TVs, and an Xbox. Normally, someone would have broken in and taken these things on the same day as the occupants moved out. Some of us could sense a presence even before we went into the house. Personally, I felt it when I was about to step into the backyard from the rickety picket gates. Something powerful and angry. I've described it as evil, seeming to watch as we crossed the property line into its territory. For me, the sensation was like walking smack into an electric fence. I wanted to turn and I wanted to run, but half of my family had already entered the house. Although it was daytime, the interior was dim. We couldn't turn on any lights because the utilities had all been turned off. We entered through the kitchen, a particularly dark, narrow room that smelled of old cooking grease, where I sensed an elderly woman's presence. She seemed to be cowering in a corner. Her stringy gray hair was held back with clips, but it had come loose at the sides. She was wearing a dress we used to call a housecoat back when I was a kid, a faded floral print. I knew right away that she wasn't the threatening presence here. In fact, I felt she was subdued because of whatever was frightening me. We did not stop in the kitchen, but instead went directly into what I imagine had once been a formal dining room. I could see the blank spaces where pictures had once hung. I'd admit I'm not a gun expert, but I saw marks that looked to me like 3 bullet holes in the cracked drywall. A table near the curtainless window was all but hidden by trash bags full of debris. None of us was interested in finding out exactly what the bags held. The atmosphere felt heavy and ominous. I had the impression of a very large, dangerous man standing in front of us, watching in fury as we looked around. I felt I could see him, a 30-ish white man, unshaven, with dark hair almost to his neckline. He was wearing one of those sleeveless shirts that some people would call wife beaters. He was holding a lit cigarette. He seemed to be claiming this room, in particular, as his territory. I don't know why this presence didn't at least try to harm us, because I think he could have. Maybe he was waiting to see what our intentions were. We ended up taking a hasty tour of the house from the main floor up to the third floor attic. No one went into the basement. We all stayed together, going up and down the stairs single file. There wasn't much to see except for miscellaneous trash, holes in the grimy drywall, broken windows repaired with cardboard, etc. One small bedroom towards the front of the house did give me the creeps, although I couldn't figure out why. A few broken toys suggested it had been a child's bedroom. I was taken aback to discover a Cub Scout uniform hanging in the doorless closet. Someone, I guess, a kid, because of the way the printed letters looked, had written on the wall with a colored marker, "I love you. You love me. We're a happy family." This was around the time when Barney the Purple Dinosaur was a popular TV personality. The words on the wall were taken from the Barney's theme song. Seeing them in a lopsided scrawl across the wall gave me a chill. I could imagine how different the little writer's life had been from the world of normalcy that Barney represented. As we started down the narrow stairwell, returning to the main floor, my son suddenly halted at the bottom step. "Come down carefully," he cautioned. "Look at the floors. These weren't here when we went upstairs." Arranged carefully on the carpet in front of the stairwell were several photos, school photos of children. They were the small, wallet-sized pictures that come as part of a photo package. Someone had laid them out in a rough fan shape facing the stairs, as if they specifically wanted us to see and appreciate the pictures when we came down. None of us remembered seeing this earlier. You won't be surprised to hear that we all dashed for the car, or that Duncan didn't buy the house. We still talk about our drug house tour to this day. A few of us felt that we had an intense experience at the house. Others didn't pick up on so much, and my husband, who seemed to function like paranormal kryptonite, sensed nothing at all. The Evil Road. When my son was in 7th grade back in 1993, he had wrestling practice after school during the fall and winter months. I would go and pick him up at around 5:30 p.m. and then would go home. At the time, we were living in rural Illinois, just south of Chicago. On the way to pick him up and bring him home was a section of a road that did not feel right. Not all of the roads on the way, just this one road. We had to drive about 3 miles on this road, and it always felt creepy. My son was the one who called it the Evil Road. It always felt as if someone was lurking, watching just out of sight. We never saw anything, but that feeling was always there. This feeling was especially strong at this one spot in the road. Now, this road was farmland all around, with homes acres away from the road itself. At this spot along the side of the road was a deep culvert overhung with trees, vines, and weeds. It just had a something off look to it. One evening, as we passed by that spot in the road, we heard tiny music coming from nowhere that we could see. It was a cloudy, cold winter night in the Midwest. The only lights we could see besides those of our car were lights from the farms in the distance. Since it was cold, dark, and sleeting, I doubt that anyone was out playing music. The music was so odd, almost as if a wind-up old-time music player or small Calliope was making the music. The style of the music was almost like what I would call Romany or mountain music from years ago. The strangest part is we could hear it with the windows closed. I wanted to stop, but my son was afraid, so we drove on hearing the music for a short time before it faded into the distance. My son dropped out of sports right after that. We never drove on that road again. We moved shortly after that, and I have not been back to that area since 1994. I still wonder about the road and the music. I tried to find out if anything had happened in the area, but never found anything that would explain the music. I like to think it's just a lingering impression from days long past. As for the bad feeling, maybe something sad happened, and that feeling lingers as well. "330 Main Street. It was the summer of 1992, about a year after my first paranormal experience. I was dating my girlfriend and eventual wife Terry for several months. We decided that, since I spent most of my time at her apartment, that it was time for me to move in. The house was a large 1860s federal-style brick residence. It was built by a pair of brothers who were leaving for the Civil War, and was created to provide a place for their sisters to live while they were away. Although the building was now split into 4 apartments, other than one small bedroom in the back of the building, 3 of the apartments were exclusively on the first floor. The original front door was converted into a private entrance, with a spiral staircase which now led to our spacious second-floor apartment. I had been living there approximately a week, when one evening, while searching for something on TV, Terry decided that she would go relax in a warm bath. The apartment from front to back consisted of a living room separated by glass French doors from a dining room which led to the kitchen. As you entered the apartment from the staircase, the living room was on the right, and a hallway extended left around the stair opening to 2 attached bedrooms, a bath, and also had a doorway into the dining room. As Terry ran her bath, I lay down on the couch, which was positioned against the wall adjacent to the hallway and stairwell. She finished running the bath and went into the bathroom and closed the door behind her. I continued watching TV for approximately 10 minutes when from the hallway, I heard a door open. Presuming it was the bathroom door, I thought that was a shorter bath than normal for her. Shortly after I heard the door open, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Hearing the footsteps, I thought it was strange that she had taken her shoes into the bathroom with her. The footsteps went the length of the hall and then could be heard on the stairs. When the sound reached the bottom of the stairs, the front door opened and then closed. She must be checking the mail or getting something out of her car, I presumed. 10 minutes passed, then 20 minutes, and Terry did not return. Thinking she bumped into one of the neighbors and was talking, I went down the stairs to see what she was up to. She was not on the front porch, and her car had not been moved. I called for her, but she did not answer. I went up the stairs and, upon reaching the top, noticed the bathroom door was closed. I walked to the door and opened it. Terry was laying in the tub, listening to her Walkman, oblivious to anything I had just experienced. When she got out of the bath, we discussed what had transpired and were somewhat unnerved. We went to bed shortly after and were laying in bed still talking about it when I started to feel a vibration in the bed. "Why is the bed moving?" I asked. The next thing I knew, the comforter we were under was thrown over my head. When I pulled it back, Terry was standing in the hallway peeking around the corner into the bedroom. "You can feel that?" she said. "I thought it was just me. It does it all the time." "All the time," a whispered voice from the attached bedroom responded. I sat up and turned towards the adjacent room, and then turned to Terry, who was standing open-mouthed in the doorway. Although her reaction already revealed the answer. Did you hear that?" I gasped. Her reply was interrupted by a loud hiss and me leaping from the bed in response to her panicked cat jumping on me and off the bed as it scrambled through the doorway Terry was standing in. We lived in the apartment for 7 more years after that night. We had several unexplainable experiences. A 3-foot-long antique bugle-like horn that we had hanging on the wall over the French doors in the dining room was found standing on end on the hardwood floor when we arrived home one day. A sharpening steel hanging on a peg in the kitchen would begin swinging and would not stop until you placed your hand on it. And our cat, who had lived in the apartment for 5 years, went missing one day. It had somehow knocked a screen out of one of its 6-foot-tall windows and had fallen 2 stories to the ground in a rainstorm. The cat always slept on a foot-wide windowsill, so it was familiar with its surroundings. The screens had custom-made wooden frames and would have taken all of the cat's strength or the strength of some unknown force to dislodge the frame. The entire screen and frame fell outwards to the ground. We found her the next day, disoriented but unharmed under a neighbor's porch. I mentioned to Terry one day, many times I had sensed or seen out of the corner of my eye a small child standing behind a rocking chair in the corner of the spare bedroom. I told her that whenever I would turn to look, it would be gone. She sat down and described the little boy in Amish-style clothing perfectly. I began working at a restaurant when I started college in 1995. I met a girl at the restaurant who lived on the same street about a block down from our home. When I told her where we lived, she replied, "Oh, you live in the haunted house." As it turns out, a friend of hers was one of the many downstairs tenants who had lived there during our stay. As she related it to me, her friend was in her apartment one evening when right below our living room and dining room, she heard a baby begin to cry in our apartment overhead. The crying soon changed to the screaming of what she presumed to be an inconsolable sick child. She knew us well enough to know that we had no children. The wailing went on for the better part of an hour until the girl got so upset at hearing the child cry, she decided to see if she could help us in some way. She exited the apartment and walked around to the front porch and knocked on the door. The crying stopped immediately. She knocked repeatedly, and no one came to the door, and no lights were on in our upstairs windows. She returned to her apartment and later witnessed us arriving home shortly after. 2 hours later, she moved out of the building. In 2000, I was chosen for a job I had applied to in Maine. We packed our belongings that we intended to take in our personal cars, and a moving company that my new employer had provided packed the rest of the delivery to Maine. We lived amongst boxes and crates for a week leading up to moving day. I came home one afternoon and discovered broken glass all over the spare bedroom. The bedroom had a closet, which was abbreviated and converted staircase, which has 2 steps lower than the floor to the spare room. A few years before, we had set a mirror we had replaced from a large antique dresser in the back of the closet, just to keep it out of the way until we could dispose of it. It weighed about 80 pounds and was leaning against the back wall with the bottom of the glass about 8 inches from the wall. Something had pushed the 4-foot by 3-foot piece of glass away from the brick wall and shattered it against the spare bedroom landing. Regardless of this protest from our unseen roommate, we bid the house farewell 2 days later and never went back.